Hi folks, HR Funk here with part 2 of my review and evaluation of the new 3rd generation Kel-Tec Sub 2000 pistol caliber carbine. If you missed part 1 of this video, I would encourage you to go back and take a look, because in that part I did a detailed shop review talking about all the features and characteristics of this little firearm. And in this part I'm going to be heading out to the range and strictly talking about how it performed and my impressions of it after shooting it. So with that intro out of the way, let's get right into it. So before heading out to the range yesterday, I installed this optic on the new Sub 2000, and this is a sight that's essentially a copy of an aim point from back in the day. It was manufactured by a company called Adco, and I don't know if Adco is even around anymore. I've probably had this sight for close to 15 years, maybe longer than 15 years. But I've got to say, for an inexpensive optic that I bought back in the day, this thing has performed pretty well. So I didn't really have any qualms about installing it on this new carbine. And once I got out to the range yesterday, the first item of business was to zero this optic. And I zeroed it at a distance of 25 yards. And then I wanted to conduct an accuracy test from different distances. So what you're about to see are 3-shot groups that I fired from 25 yards, 50 yards, and then 100 yards, all using this optic. Now this is a non-magnifying optic with a 3-minute of angle dot, so keep that in mind when you're looking at the groups. This is not what I would call a precision optic, and again, there's no magnification offered whatsoever. Also, the ammunition that I'm using for all of these tests is from House of Pain Munitions, and it is their 147 grain poly-coated ammo. And again, this is the ammunition that you can get a subscription for from House of Pain. If you go to the House of Pain website, you can set it up for the frequency you want and the quantity you want. And this is great ammunition that can be delivered right to your door as often as you'd like it to. So anyway, when I got out there, here is what my accuracy test looked like from those various distances. And here are those first shots from 25 yards marked with the blue stickers. And I was not taking my time trying to get the absolute tightest group that I could. I basically was just holding the dot in the center of the target and squeezing that trigger. And I'll say right now, and I will probably repeat this a couple of times during the video, the trigger on the Sub 2000 for any generation, but the Gen 3 especially, is nothing to write home about. Even so, it works. And there's no problems keeping bullets right where you want them to go on a target like this. So next, I move back to 50 yards, and let's take a look at the 50-yard performance. The 50-yard shots I marked with green stickers, and you can see the group there is not a whole lot bigger than the group that I had at 25 yards. And again, I'm shooting at a pretty rapid shot tempo and not really trying to take my time and attempt to squeeze off the absolute most precise shot that I can. And there's no problems keeping those bullets right on the target there. Now the group is slightly off to the left. I had just finished zeroing this when I started the accuracy test at 25 yards. So based on the location of this group, I did make a sight correction before I moved to 100 yards. I came 4 minutes of angle to the right, and I wasn't sure when I got to 100 yards what to expect for the drop with that 147 grain hot munitions ammunition. I thought about holding the dot on the chin, but I just wasn't sure, so I decided to continue with my center chest hold and just try to find out exactly what kind of drop that I was going to get, along with what kind of accuracy that I could expect at that distance of 100 yards. So here's what the 100-yard group looked like. And I marked the 100-yard shots with the black stickers. Now, the drop from 100 yards with that 147 grain ammunition is about 5.5 inches to the center of this 3-shot group. 2 of the shots are nicely centered windage-wise. I've got one of them off to the right here. This was probably me pulling it a little bit with that trigger squeeze that I was talking about a little while ago that is just not that great on the Sub 2000. Even so, had I gone with that chin hold that I talked about earlier, these shots would have all been pretty well centered in the chest. None of them would have really been a bad shot per se from that distance of 100 yards. So definitely the sub 2000 Gen 3 is minute of bad guy accurate from 100 yards. So up to this point, the little carbine is really kind of impressing me. It's functioning well, the accuracy is certainly acceptable, and it's fun to shoot. And I'll talk about that more coming up when I talk about my actual shooting impressions of it. So with the zeroing and accuracy test out of the way, I wanted to move into some more close-range defensive drills, more of what the sub 2000 really is intended for. And I started out at a distance of 5 yards, firing controlled pairs, and here's how that went. And once again, I've used the black stickers to mark the location of those shot holes that I fired in the controlled pair drill from 5 yards. And understanding that was only 5 yards, still at the shot tempo I was shooting, and again, dealing with that trigger in the sub 2000 that's not all that great, I don't think I could have asked much more of any firearm on that type of a drill. That is a very tight cluster. They're all very well centered in the chest. I think that was just tremendous performance from the sub 2000 on that drill. So next, I moved back to a distance of 7 yards, and from that distance of 7 yards, I decided to try a multiple adversary drill. For this drill, I fire 1 shot at the target on the right, 3 shots at the target on the left, and then 2 more shots at the target on the right, all in rapid succession. And this is testing the ability of the firearm under recoil to be able to acquire and reacquire the target, and also to be able to keep follow-up shots going right where you want them to go. So here's how the multiple adversary drill went. Folks, something I meant to mention in that last segment is before I shot the multiple adversary drill, I made a change, and the change was in the ammunition that I was shooting. This time around, I loaded up with 115 grain jacketed hollow point hot munitions ammunition, so this was defensive ammunition, and I wanted to test the functioning of hollow points through the new sub 2000, and as you saw, it functioned flawlessly. When I look at the placement of the shots that I marked with the light blue stickers here, I once again really couldn't have asked for much better performance from any firearm that I'm getting from that third generation sub 2000. I have 2 shots, 1 on each target that went just a little bit high, but truthfully, I don't think my bad guy is going to notice much difference between a shot that hits here and a shot that hits here. I think these are all going to be very effective shots. Once again, I'm shooting at that very rapid shot tempo, and it's just putting bullets basically right where I want them to go. So now it was time to fire another drill from 7 yards. This time around, I'm going to be firing a failure drill, which is 2 shots to the body and 1 shot to the head in rapid succession, and here's how that drill went. And here's a look at the results of the failure drills. These shots I marked with the yellow stickers, and all of the body shots are inside of this center square. I think that's tremendous performance from that distance of 7 yards. My headshots are all located well. This one is just above this line. Once more, I don't think my bad guy is going to notice any difference between this shot and this shot. I think these are all very effective from that distance of 7 yards. So on these relatively close range defensive drills, I think the sub 2000 is doing tremendous. Next, I moved back to a distance of 15 yards, and from 15 yards, I fired 5 shots to the body, once again keeping with that relatively fast shot tempo, and here's how that drill went. The shots from 15 yards I marked with the green stickers. They are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All of them well centered in the chest, well inside of this center square in the target. There's really not much more I can say, folks. I'm shooting very rapidly. Basically, as soon as I come out of recoil and I see the dot settle in the middle of the target again, I'm cycling that trigger and the bullets are going right where I want them to go. So now I backed up to 25 yards to try the same exact drill. This is going to be 5 shots to the body from 25 yards, and here's how that went. The shots from 25 yards I marked with the red stickers. Again, there's not much I can say. It's just putting the bullets right where I want them to go. I've got 2 shots that are just slightly off to the right here. They're still going to be good, effective lung shots. I've got 3 of them that are inside that center square. And once more, I was shooting just about as quickly as the dot centered on the target, and I could cycle the trigger. So since this went so well, I decided to try 5 headshots from 25 yards, and here's how the headshots went. And the headshots from 25 yards I marked once again with the blue stickers. Something I want to emphasize about the 25-yard shooting, specifically the headshots, is that once again I want to remind everyone this is a non-magnified optic. I am just coming up here. I have a 3-minute of angle dot, which from that distance is about 3/4 of an inch, give or take. And it's drifting around here somewhere, and I'm just trying to hold it and squeeze the trigger, and you can see the results there. I am extremely happy with this. I have 1 shot that's slightly off to the right here. This is probably going to take this individual out of the fight. These are going to end his day. So once again, there's just not much more I can say. I think this is outstanding performance from a sub $500, very inexpensive firearm shooting 9mm ammunition. I am very, very happy with this performance. So final thoughts on the Gen-3 Sub 2000. I've got several of them, beginning with when I identified this magazine in part 1 of this series. I misidentified it as a Glock magazine. It's a Glock pattern magazine, but this is actually a PMag from Magpul. And one of the things that I noticed with this magazine is loading it all the way to 15 rounds takes some work. To get those last 1 or 2 rounds in there really takes some effort to get them seated in the magazine. Now, maybe this spring will relax over time and that issue will go away a little bit, but I did want to point that out. Probably related to that is the fact that initially with the bolt closed, when I would try to seat this magazine in the magazine well, it took a pretty good pop to get the thing to seat in there. It did not want to seat very well. Once I got it seated, there was never an issue with it. It functioned just fine, and I never had a malfunction of any sort all the way through all the shooting that I did. I'll emphasize that again later. Now, I did have a Glock 19 magazine with me out there, a factory Glock magazine. First off, there was no problem loading 15 rounds into it, and when I seated it in the magazine well, it did not require nearly as much effort to seat it. So if you've got Glock magazines, you might not have to worry about the PMags at all, but that is something I noticed with that factory included magazine, and I wanted to be sure to mention that here at the end of the video. The trigger on the Gen-3 Sub 2000 is noticeably poorer in terms of its quality than the trigger on my Gen-2. I don't know if that's a generational thing or if it's just the difference between one firearm to the next, but the trigger definitely does feel better on my Gen-2. When I'm shooting it, it breaks cleaner to some degree. This is all relative. We're still talking about a sub 2000 trigger, but it breaks cleaner and it has a more positive reset. So again, I don't know if that's just the difference between this one and that one, or if it's a difference from the Gen-2 to the Gen-3, but I wanted to point out the difference in the trigger as well. Poor quality trigger or not, the trigger on the Gen-3 certainly was not a hindrance when it came to putting shots on target. As you just saw from the range footage, it was very easy to keep those shots going right where I wanted them to go, and the trigger obviously worked every single time that I cycled it. So again, this is all relative. I wanted to be sure to point out that this has a poorer quality trigger, but it still works. It does exactly what it's supposed to do, so I can't be too critical. Another characteristic of the Gen-3 that I noticed while using it has to do with deploying it from the folded position. With the Gen-2, and I'll demonstrate this here in a moment, it locks into position much more positively. The Gen-3 seems to require a little bit more effort to get it to lock into place. Now, I mentioned in the first video that could have something to do with the fact that this is a brand new firearm and my Gen-2 has been open and closed many times. But something that is specific to the Gen-3 is the fact that when you're rotating it into place, it's possible to over-rotate it. And I'll come up here a little closer to the camera so you can see this hopefully. If I have it folded and I'm opening it up, the idea is to rotate it about 90 degrees and then lock it into place. But it is possible to rotate it beyond that 90 degrees. In fact, I've now gone almost 180 degrees. And if you over rotate it and try to get it to lock into place, it's not going to. So it does require a little bit of work to get that in there. As I said, that might improve in time as the parts wear a little bit. I don't know, but that's another one of those kind of odd characteristics that I wanted to be sure to mention. And just to demonstrate that with the Gen 2, it simply comes right over the top and locks into position. There's no twisting of the fore end or anything else, but I then have to rotate my optic into place. So there's kind of a trade-off there. I would like to see the Gen 3 improved to the point where the fore end rotates to the exact proper position and then stops, so it can't be over rotated, and then the only thing the user has to do is lock it in place. And something I've noticed is what you see me keep doing here. A lot of times when I bring it down, if it doesn't lock, I can pop the bottom of the trigger guard and that will lock it into place. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about picking up one of the Gen 3 sub 2000s. Another thing that I noticed, and this is not specific to the sub 2000 because I have had a lot of firearms that I've tested over the last year or so that have had this exact same issue. And it has to do with the threaded barrel and this knurled thread protector. I'm not sure why companies go to the time and expense to thread a barrel and then add a knurled thread protector, but they don't put what's probably going to be a 1 penny, 2 penny O-ring at the bottom of the thread to help secure the knurled thread protector. I did notice as I was shooting yesterday, when I would check this at various times, it was getting loose. And obviously, if it gets loose enough, it might take a ride down range with a bullet. So that could be prevented very easily if you want to get your own O-ring, but I cannot figure out why companies don't include that. And again, this is not specific to Kel-Tec. It's a lot of other firearms, some of which are much more expensive, that I have seen the exact same issue with. As far as functional reliability is concerned with the Gen 3 sub 2000, it was perfect. I shot it with mostly that 147 grain poly-coated hot munitions ammunition. It fed and functioned with that just fine. I switched over to the hollow point ammunition at one point. It fed and functioned with that just fine. So there's been no problem so far that I've run into with functioning at all. Now I've only run about 60 rounds through it at this point, but I couldn't be any happier with its performance to this juncture. When it comes to accuracy, just look behind me here. I'm not going to be trading in my sniper rifle on a sub 2000 anytime soon, but for anything you could reasonably ask of a carbine like this, I think it's doing fantastic. It's also a lot of fun to shoot, and I probably should have mentioned this earlier in the video. When I got to the range yesterday, I was in kind of a lousy mood. The weather had been awful. I didn't get out to the range as early as I wanted to. I had a bunch of other stuff going on, so I got set up and started to shoot, and the longer I shot and the better the performance that I saw that I was getting from the sub 2000, the more my mood improved. By the time I left the range, I was happy, I was smiling. So this is good for your mental health as well. I quite enjoyed shooting the sub 2000, and again, I think the accuracy was tremendous for this type of a firearm. So here's a question I was asked. If you have a Gen 2 sub 2000 that you're happy with, should you upgrade to a Gen 3? I would say the answer to that depends a lot on you. If you have a sub 2000 Gen 2 set up the way you like it, and either you don't use it with an optic or you've already got an optics mount for it and you've trained with it, you know how to use it and it works well for you, I don't know if I see a big reason to upgrade. On the other hand, if you don't have a special mount, or if you don't own a sub 2000 and you are specifically thinking of outfitting it with an optic, then the nice thing about the Gen 3 is you don't have to spend another $100, $125 or so in order to get a special mount in order to allow it to fold, and be stowed the way that it's supposed to be. I don't know. I would say it's entirely up to you. Look at the information that I presented throughout this review, and you'll have to make up your own mind as far as that goes. So I think at the end of the day, if this were a more expensive firearm, I could probably find a lot of nits to pick with it. In fact, I've picked a few as it is, but if this was a $650, $700 or more firearm, there are a lot of these things I would be much more critical of. But for sub $500, and with a little bit of shopping, you can probably find it quite a bit sub $500. The sub 2000 runs. It's certainly accurate enough for its intended purpose. It's fun, and I think you could probably do a whole lot worse than one of these. In any case, that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it'll save you 7% off your purchase from Optics Planet. And remember, Hop Munitions, you can use my discount code there at either Hop Munitions or Hop Armament. And the discount code is HRFUNK, and that'll save you some money off your purchase from Hop Munitions. And I want to say thanks to the folks from House of Pain for loaning me the Sub 2000 and also providing the ammunition that you saw in today's video. And last but not least, don't forget the Target sponsor. You can go to Target's online, check out their inventory, and see if they have anything that's going to meet your Target needs. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.